Hey guys, how's it going? Today's video is an impromptu review of Ironlak Markers. I'd never ever heard of the Ironlak brand before, but when I went to Brisbane this year for Brisbane Supernova, they had a big booth there, and I sort of wandered past and went, ooh, art supplies, and went back there a bit later and I discovered that they have alcohol markers of their own brand. Being that I was a Copic ambassador for the first half of this year, I'm kind of pretty interested in how other markers add up. So I figured that I would go and have a play with them because they had their entire range of markers available to play with at their booth, and I figured I would video it. So I just want to have a little disclaimer before we get into it. I've obviously never used these markers before. I'm going into them with a background of having used Copics all my life. I'm using them in a sketchbook that I specifically use for alcohol markers. It is not an alcohol marker paper, but it is actually one that I've found works surprisingly well with them. So let's jump into it, and hopefully I can give you guys some insight from my point of view. I got a chance to play with both the Ironlak Strikers Tri-Grip and the Strikers Brush Tip. Now obviously the brush tip is going to be my favourite because that's what I use in the Copics. I find that that's a much easier tip to blend with, but they didn't have all of the colours in the brush tip, so I sort of swapped between them depending on what colour I needed. First thing I did was I sat down at my table and I sketched out this picture here. This is based on Loie Lane, who's also a YouTuber. She is gorgeous. Obviously I didn't colour it to look like her, but the original sketch is based on a picture of her. I outlined that in a Copic multi-liner, which was the lavender shade, and then I headed on down to the booth to have a play with their markers. So the first thing I realised pretty much straight off the bat was that it just didn't blend even just to itself. Normally when you use an alcohol marker, the whole point of using alcohol markers instead of just like normal textures is that the alcohol helps the pigment to blend into different colours. But these markers I was finding didn't even blend the same colour, like just the one marker couldn't make a flat colour. And I was finding it really frustrating. I was sort of trying to work out like if maybe just there was a different way that I was supposed to be coloring for this to work. But initially I found that where you initially started your stroke, there was an awful lot of pigment that would happen there, and then nothing when you actually made the stroke to move the color across the page. And so I thought maybe I was putting too much pressure down in the initial stroke, and so I tried to do sort of a zigzag motion where I didn't have any different kind of pressure the whole way through. That didn't seem to work either, and I was just getting really frustrated. Another thing I noticed pretty early on was the brush tip is I don't know if the actual tip is shorter than what I'm used to with a Copic marker, but the barrel that it comes out of the texture is wider. So the wideness of that barrel was actually too big for the length of the brush tip. I was struggling to see around it to see where I was touching down on the paper. This resulted in me going out of the lines a few times, which is something I pride myself on not doing very often. And yeah, I sort of had to like lean right out to the side to be able to see exactly where I was placing pigment down too, which is just a really odd design decision. On the upside, this pink that I'm using now blended really, really nicely into that skin color that I've used. So at this point I was wondering if maybe I just picked the wrong color initially. Maybe that skin color just isn't a good pigment. It just doesn't blend for whatever reason. Or maybe it was running out. So I was sort of hoping maybe the rest of it would go well. So I'm now using this charcoal marker, which is also a brush tip. It was significantly fuller, I felt, than the skin color that I'd used, so theoretically it should blend better. It did blend better, as you can see, but it still wasn't quite up to the standard that I would expect from a decent alcohol marker. It was still quite patchy and mottly. So I just wanted to show you how much shorter these brush tips are. This is half the size, I reckon, of a Copic brush tip, and you can see that the barrel it's coming out of is almost the same length, so no wonder it's difficult to see around it. So I didn't bother recording the purple. It was also a brush marker, but it was significantly running out of ink, so you can definitely see the issues there with that, and I didn't think it was really fair to review a marker that was running so low on ink. So I couldn't find this colour in any of the brush tips, so I've now started using one of the Tri-Grip twin marker markers. And that's got a fine bullet tip and a broad chisel tip. So I'm using the fine tip here. Obviously it's not going to blend as well as the brush tip, but I thought it would be interesting to see how well it did. I got a little bit frustrated with how small the bullet tip was and it wasn't covering much ground, so I also decided to try the broad chisel tip. That light green that I had used there, I think that's probably my favorite of all of the colors that I used on this day. I think it's because it was a lighter color, so maybe I can't see the blotchiness as easily as all the other colors I've used. And I actually think overall these two greens were probably the best performing out of every other color and marker that I used on the day. At this point, one of the girls manning the Ironlak booth spotted me and came over and had a chat. I was talking to her about how I used to be an ambassador for Copic, and so I was quite intrigued by other markers that I'd never heard of before and to see the differences between them. And she was so lovely and decided that she wanted to shout me out on their Instagram story, which I was very grateful for. And after that, we were sort of talking about all the other things that Ironlak do and specialize in, and she ended up giving me this little box of goodies so I could take it home with me and review all of their other stuff as well. So that was so lovely of her, and that might be an upcoming video for you guys. So here's what I ended up with using the Ironlak Striker alcohol markers, both in the brush tip and the normal one. Overall, I'm not particularly impressed. It is blotchy. I was frustrated with the design of the actual physical marker. The colors, while there were some really beautiful colors that I actually really loved, the entire color range is a bit lacking. Having said that, I think I'm a little bit spoilt with Copic, seeing as they have so many colors. I found it really frustrating that just a single color can't blend with itself, let alone with another color. For those of you who are curious, here is an example of what Copic looks like on this exact same paper. This is just a few pages previous. As you can see, they blend much nicer. They're not particularly patchy, particularly not within their own color, and particularly the skin colors blend seamlessly. And then here we go back to the Ironlak markers where we can see there is quite a big difference. Personally, overall, I'm not going to be buying any of their markers. They are, I guess, decent for people who are just starting out, who want to sort of get in the door on a cheaper marker. Your Ironlak markers are $5.49 versus a Copic Chow at $4.75, or a sketch marker which is $8.30. Honestly, I would go the Chow if I were you, but I think I'm a little bit biased, but for me, they just didn't quite do the job. I hope you guys enjoyed this one. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up so I know to maybe do some more reviews for you. Next time it might be a little bit better because it won't be just an impromptu review where I haven't realized I was going to do on that day. And if you liked this video, please check out the other videos on my channel, and if you like those, it would be awesome if you'd want to subscribe. I'd love to have you here. If you want to see more of my artwork that is not patchy, you can check out all the links down below in the description. And yeah, I will see you guys next time. Bye!